Oh,
Everyone
just
knows I'm terrible at it, Leanne. So, so when you're in a meeting with me, you draw the short straw.
is that it? I've never seen your
Oh, I like can't you like if I'm doing the minutes, like forget me even trying to participate. Like if you ask me a question, I'm like, what? No,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. What?
You should see the communications meetings because I do the notes for that, and I cannot, I can barely keep those things moving because I get so distracted.
I feel like you do a really good job. So thank you.
I agree.
So we are first on our agenda is to review the 2021 2022 calendar.
Okay. So I actually have a little slide deck that I could share with you if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just realized my camera wasn't on.
I was gonna text you.
Okay. So take a look at this. All right. So, so here's our calendar proposal. All right. So kind of just to kick us off, this is the current draft that you have seen, right? And so just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, the dates in terms of school days or non-school days, this is solidified because per state statute, we had to sit and make agreements with our regional partners. So this is the part to which we already had board approval of or had informed you about because that needed to happen in a different time frame. So what we wanted to do today is to talk with you about a proposal. There are two pieces that we want to look at. One is the number of late start days, and then the other second piece is about a proposal for a start to school for next year. So Kelly and Anne are here to talk about the proposal. And so I will let them go ahead and do that. Kelly, Anne?
Sure. Okay, so
sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. Sorry.
So the first part of the proposal is with regard to increasing the basically with staff development time through the use of our Wednesday late start model. So you can see on the slide, it's going to require some additional collaboration and professional development to transition to full-time in-person learning for our students. It's been a long haul here, and we've still got some time ahead of us. And transitioning to what we really are hopeful for a more typical year next year will require a culture of continuous improvement. I'd mentioned even in the budget slides around meeting students where they are, and they're coming from many different present levels of performance and different experiences throughout this pandemic. So at the current time, we would like to maximize the time that we have available for these efforts, and increasing the amount of time that we have for late starts or early release. I'm not sure if that's in a later slide. Is the most cost efficient option. Adding additional school days costs upwards of $200,000. As you are well aware. So this regularly scheduled time for professional development is just really, timely to create these continued improvements. The I talked in the budget proposal about pandemic silver linings, and I think that we have created some great momentum for, I'm speaking from a K-5 perspective, but we've never within our schedule really been able to carve out that dedicated time for full grade level meetings for planning for student needs. It's been more learning community based just for straight coverage needs. And with our current schedule, we are able to do that every single week. And it has been invaluable in terms of guaranteed and viable curriculum access for our students. So that's this part. So, Anne, do you want to talk about what it could potentially look like?
Well, before I do that, if you don't mind, I'd also like to add that having more time on these Wednesday afternoons would also give us the opportunity to collaborate with our neighboring districts. So, if we have a music teacher at K2 and there's only one other music teacher in the district that works part-time, there's not a lot of team in that, but there may be lots of people that they can collaborate with in districts nearby that all have this Wednesday afternoon time that's designated for PD. So they have more opportunities to reach out beyond our district and outside of our own school district to do this, not just like Kelly said with grade levels, because our grade levels, I can't even get 4 teachers to have a common planning time, much less a whole grade, much less a whole grade level at a time kind of thing. So it's a huge issue, and there's so many positives that could come from this. And so I won't keep blathering on about that, but you can hear that this is really important and meaningful to us. So this chart talks about what is the give to get here, and what are we looking at right now? We have the late starts. Well, last year we had late starts. This year we have Wednesday early releases. And I think that this chart summarizes really nicely like the total number of hours that we're looking at and the preferred choices based on staff feedback. So I think it very clearly shows that our preference would be 1.5 hours a week, just so we can have some really concentrated focused time. And how much we get for that? That's 54 hours of PD in a year, which is just really, we could fill that up and then some, but we really need it coming back out of this global pandemic nightmare that we've been in for the last year. So I'm not going to read every box in the chart, but you can see all the different configurations we looked at and how we narrowed it down to our top 2 choices are early releases on Wednesday afternoons. We prefer 1.5 hours, but if we have to take an hour, we'll do that too, or every other week, 1.5 hours. But we'd really like every week just for consistency.
And then the other piece of information in regards to this is we did reach out to other communities just to, again, I think it's helpful to know how do other communities approach either early release or late start. So if you take a look at this, you can see that we've done some data collection around what other partners are doing, and you can see that that does differ according to different districts. We do have some partners who are providing regular PD every Wednesday. We have some that are doing half days. There definitely does seem to be more folks who are doing the early release at this time versus a late start. And so again, these are just points of information for you. And then, so that's the first piece. Do that before we dig into the start of school.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I have a question on if this change was to happen, would this replace the PD days or the staff days that occur throughout the year?
So remember that we only have actually 2 PD days throughout the year, because in the calendar or in the teacher contract, for example, there are 5 PD days. 2 of those are give backs for conferences. And so those end up being comp days. One is the day before Thanksgiving. The other is the day before April break. So that leaves us 3 PD days. We generally do 1, right, at the start of the school year. If you take a look at the calendar draft, we're positioning 2 of those at the start of the year this year. So there is only 1 other PD day in the entire year's calendar.
So this would be in addition to that day.
Right. Because that 1 day, although that's wonderful, that 1 day is going to come in the middle of March 2022. And so, I think what I'm hearing our principals say, and what we've been talking about at Leadership Council is the lift that's going to need to be required to help our students in terms of make up for loss or transition back to in-person learning is going to require continued professional development for our teachers. In addition to just the ongoing things that we want to provide professional development in. For example, our DEI committee is just starting to dig into that work, and there are going to be some recommendations that will come from that group in regards to professional development. Our SEL group is looking at curriculum for students. That's going to require professional development. We're still working on acclimating to this new math curriculum. The state is changing the required assessments yet again. So all of these things require professional development time.
The reality is that they're, specifically challenging this year, but it has been a challenge for several years. There aren't substitutes to provide release time for teachers. If you just looked at the sub-report today for Wentworth, we're already short-staffed 4 people. Then we're down 5 classroom teachers, 2 related service providers, 2 special education ed techs, which is 9 FTEs. And it's kind of a typical day here this year. We don't have the flex. We haven't had a substitute in this building since I think before the December break. So we're just patching things together every single day and having this clearly dedicated time. I think it is the emphasis on quality. We're unable to pull it off during the student day because it's all hands on deck supporting kids all day.
And it's hard to anticipate if more people are going to feel comfortable coming back to substitute next year. We absolutely hope so. And, it is almost a necessity for us. But I think, everybody is trying to do the best that they can do.
Can someone speak a little bit to early release versus late start?
Diane, do you want to kick that off? I mean, it was a conversation that we started.
I can certainly kick it off. I think, one of the things, that we have heard from parents, not just this year, but in the past, is that part of the challenge of doing a late start in our district is that our older students leave for school before our younger students. And so for those parents who are working and might have students at different levels, they don't have childcare necessarily built in. The benefit of early release is that our older students would be dismissed first. And so that does free them up for those families who rely on that. Also, on the other side of the coin, a challenge of doing early release instead of late start is that you end up having to figure out for those students who are returning after school for activities or athletics, where's the holding area for them? So that does become a challenge to that. One of the things that we did discuss, and again, I think as a team, we could live with either one of these options because we just really recognize the need for the time. But one of the things that we had discussed very briefly was if we had the benefit of an early release. Right now, our staff meetings happen on Mondays. But if we had this time on Wednesdays, we might be able to bank our staff meeting time on Wednesdays up against this. So we would actually have more than an hour and a half, right? We would have 2.5 hours potentially. Again, you know, the hour and a half doesn't take into account the amount of time that it takes for kids to leave school. So that's why we're not asking for an hour. Because if we were asking for an hour by the time kids left on buses, etc., we really wouldn't have a whole lot of time left. I see that Jessica is in the audience. I just don't know how to share my screen and promote people. So hang on 1 minute while
One of the other drivers for early release versus late start, which it does feel like a pendulum swing a little bit because, you know, we were late start and then early release, but what Anne mentioned earlier in terms of being able to having the ability to partner with some neighboring districts if you are a team of one, like a primary music teacher, there is some availability to take advantage of our Sebago Alliance group and, you know, just local partnerships as one of the other drivers. And Jessica here.
I actually wasn't planning to join. I was just listening, but I'm here now. Hi.
Hi. What was the historical reason for the switch from early release to late start?
Yeah, Anne and I were here when that change occurred. It came with a superintendent who had done that in a previous district. I think that was part of it. And I think another part of it was the rationale that the day, you know, once kids got here, the day could be, it was less disruptive in some way. And, you know, teachers were fresh in the morning. They weren't tired from a day of teaching. I think that there's always kind of like a 6 of one, half dozen of the other argument for almost every single one of the points when you talk about late start and early release. But if you look at our district partnerships, I think we were the only ones doing late start. So it just made less and less sense over the years.
I would agree with that. I think it came with the superintendent who thought it was a good idea, and we, you know, made it work. And it was also a balance to, you know, what about those middle school kids wreaking havoc at the library or wherever they were. So I think there were some, you know, there was some safety issues that came up, and I think that was our attempt to address them. What it ended up happening is then there were younger kids whose older siblings who might help get them on the bus were no longer able to do that kind of thing. So it's a balance. It's exactly what Kelly said. There's always a balance, and there's always as many people saying I want it this way as there are people saying they want it that way. And I think the benefit of being in the afternoon at this point is all that other collaborative opportunity for people outside of our district. And it really does benefit the younger kids to having a normal morning. Their morning starts late in some ways already, and to push it back to 10:20 or 10:30 in the morning, we lose all of their prime learning time to some degree with that very late start and that very difficult start for them, because nothing is the way it normally is. So at least it starts their day off in a normal, typical, routine, predictable fashion, which is really best for at least the K-5 kids, I think.
But I think, to reiterate, it's less important for us to decide late start versus early release for purposes of this conversation than it is to just strongly advocate for that that dedicated professional development time on a consistent basis. If there was ever a year to make this shift, it's this year. It's actually, less time than what our Wednesdays are right now. Right now, for example, at Wentworth, we get out, our student day ends at noon, and with an hour and a half proposal, it would be 1:45. So we could really accomplish a lot with our students. Up until 1:45, we could run pretty close to a normal schedule with abbreviated periods. We could get creative with the time. So I do think it's an emphasis on quality over quantity in terms of giving staff the time that they need to be able to truly plan and deliver the instruction at the level that's needed.
Diana, can you put it back on the neighboring charts?
Yep.
Chart?
Again. Sure.
I was wondering what our the number of hours were last year, or the last normal year we had before the pandemic, I guess.
So our previous to this year's model was late start, and school would start, I believe it was an hour and a half. Is that correct? My other people help me out.
An hour and 20 minutes.
It was an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, it wasn't even like, it didn't even, wasn't even like a clean make sense.
Right. And again, I know, like, I can speak for when I was at the middle school as principal, even though it was an hour and 20 minutes, the buses would start coming at 9:05, even though PD started at 8 o'clock. And so it really was just about an hour of, concentrated time that you could have, because as students began to get dropped off, you had to make sure that there were people there to oversee those students.
Maybe I didn't ask that well. My question is that I guess that your request is to go to either 36 or 54 additional hours on top of the 3 days. What were the number of hours in addition to the 3 days the last normal year before the pandemic?
So the last normal year, so there have been various configurations of this, Alicia, in terms of timing, from everything from every single week the high school had 1 year to every other week to once a month. I think our most recent iteration was once a month though, right?
So how many hours would that be?
So
12.
Yeah.
I did quick napkin math. So if we say an hour and 20 minutes and we say 9 times, that's 12 hours.
12 hours. Okay. Thank you.
And again, I'm not sure who said it. It might have been Kelly, but in the past, we've had the opportunity to do focused PD for small groups of people during the school day, or curriculum work during the school day. That is not an option for us at the current time. And it's hard for us to be able to know whether we will be able to lean on that in the coming school year.
Diane, with respect to the 30 minutes between releases for the phase levels, is that enough time for busing in order to get all of the younger children picked up after dropping off the high school and the middle school?
So again, I certainly could check in with Sarah about that before we finalize something. But let me go back here. I think that is pretty close to where we are at. It really only differs by probably about 10 minutes.
Okay.
And of course, this whole conversation is making many assumptions about what next year will look like, right? That we can have full buses of students and that we can have all of our kids back in person, and we're making many assumptions on some kind of best case scenarios for next school year.
Have you solicited input from staff and parents? And if so, how did you do that?
So we have not. We wanted to come to you first.
Well, we have solicited feedback from staff. We talked about this at least at the K2 level, and the staff have all talked about how valuable Wednesday afternoons have been, and how if they could keep anything from this year, that is something they would like to keep, at least at the K2 level. I don't know what the other phases did.
We did the same thing. We did kind of a mid-year reflection, and what came up over and over and over as, what is working well for staff, and what have been some of the positives that we can identify from this year. It has been that Wednesday afternoon professional development time to work with colleagues and share expertise and receive professional development.
Just because I'm not in the educational field, what's the literature or data say about professional development in terms of results in the classroom? You know that?
If Monique were here, she could rattle it right off for you. But I know one of the things that's even on her budget slide is that the research is very clear that the quality of the teacher, I could pull up her budget slide and tell you exactly, she has it quoted exactly, but
does that actually reflect the number of hours, it actually increase the effectiveness of the teacher?
So for example, I don't know whether there's a direct correlation between what you're asking for, Alicia, but if I consider the fact that teachers might need to learn how to give a new state assessment or how to review the results of that data, we literally have to find time during which to make that happen. And what I heard, our principals saying is that they are having a hard time even patching together a meeting of grade level teachers. And so to then think about the concentrated amount of time that you need to learn how to give a new assessment, give the assessment, come back, review the data from that assessment, understand the instructional implications of that. All of that has to happen in concert with other teachers.
I'm just weighing the fact that the kids have lost so much educational time, and so that makes me really worried.
I totally get that it seems counterintuitive, Alicia, right? To after coming back from this pandemic but just out of respect for our professional staff and the work that they've put in over the course of this school year, and being able to meet kids who are going to be coming in having so many different experiences and being at so many different levels, it will be different than ever before. They're really going to require that time in order to do it well. Monique's slide says professional development, the research is clear, the quality of the teacher makes the difference. And so that's what I was thinking about. And so that quality can happen when we have the time to collaborate in a meaningful way. I hear what you're saying, though, Alicia. It does feel really counterintuitive, but it's not.
And not all of this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but not all of this is about training teachers to do something. A lot of this time is letting teachers collaborate and see where their kids are based on assessment data, based on their formative information, and saying how do we support this group of kiddos that needs this? And how do we support that group of kids that needs something else? And how do Kelly and I work together as a teaching team to look at our group of kids in a larger way? And you need time to look to do that. You can't just do it on the fly in the hallway. So you need time to really sit down and look at your data and thoughtfully plan out, what interventions am I going to do in my classroom for this group of kids? And what interventions does this group of kids need differently? And that just takes time and energy. And I hear what you're saying about they've already lost time, but if we really want to make next year more meaningful, we need to give the teachers time to collaborate and to plan and to keep up, and not just once a month check in with each other. And they need working time. They need regular working time.
Alicia, I can share. I actually just recently, I'm not supposed to be part of this meeting, I'm sorry. This specific question, I recently did a project for Maine Department of Education and Maine Roads to Quality, which is the professional development network for the early childhood community in the state of Maine. And one of the resources we used was on leading pre-K3 learning communities. So I just went and grabbed that book just to reiterate everything that Ann Lovejoy just said around teachers need that high sense of self-efficacy, and they're more likely to adopt new classroom practices. That collaboration time that they have with each other is what actually moves the needle for kids. So if we don't give them time to have that professional learning community within their work days, or outside, if we don't have that, if they don't have that, then they can't do and learn and make changes in their practices, which goes directly into the classroom and impacts student learning. So it's totally here that the time with kids, but teachers can be more effective with kids when they have that collaborative learning time. Sorry to pipe in so loud, sorry.
Thank you.
I've often used the adage in the back of my head that, what if we train our staff and they leave? What if we don't and they stay? I think we're better off investing in our staff like this. This is really going to give us far more bang for our buck than many other things, especially coming out of this year, to honor the time that they need together, to support each other, to learn from each other, to collaborate, and to grow, and to support kids.
I may just have somewhat of a bias against I have to question myself about it, because for me, when in my job, if I feel like I need to brush up on something, I do it on my own time. And the fact that everything's negotiated and then it comes out of the kids' learning time just doesn't feel good to me. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so resistant to the thought, because it doesn't feel right.
Well, I can guarantee that teachers do that on their own time too.
Do they?
Absolutely, they do. They're taking classes on their own time. They're going to workshops on their own time. They're doing all kinds of their own individualized professional development all the time, whether it's through social media or just because that's what they talk about, just like you talk about work with your work colleagues. But that doesn't mean they don't deserve this time.
It's not about being deserving. It's about that. I think that, for example, parent-teacher conferences are clumped out of professional learning time, and then we're taking away class time to give professional learning time, and it just doesn't feel right. If what you need to be effective at your job then takes away from doing your job.
I think the difference that we're talking about, I totally hear what you're saying, Alicia, because if I need to grow professionally, I should go and seek that out myself. I think what we're talking about is, this isn't about individual teachers growing and what they need to do. This is about the collaboration time that's needed by our teachers, and not every schedule outside of the workday is going to jive. I mean, just think about the meetings that we try to craft together for board work. it's very challenging to find a time that's not dedicated for everyone, that works for everyone. And if we're talking about especially, professional development in terms of training and so on, somebody can't necessarily learn about something without that scheduled training that's organized.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, Diane. I totally hear what you're saying, Alicia, but for me, it's like the guaranteed and viable part of it, right? So not individual professional growth, but systemic professional growth opportunities, and that it's not, I want all kids to have the experience of a teacher who has had the training in responsive classroom, because we know that that's the SEL tool that's going to move the needle and really support kids when they come back. But because this teacher, has a part-time job or has parenting or whatever, we're all in different phases of our lives, legitimately so. Carving out that time is the only way for me to know for sure that every kid's teacher will have had this experience.
And I don't mean that, excuse me, necessarily. I don't mean it as a pointing fingers towards teachers. It's just more like the way the system's set up in my mind. That's counterintuitive to me.
Can I add one more thing? When I've never worked outside of education. I've only worked in this system, but my husband is not. And so one thing that I do notice about the education system is that we work in teams. Even, one of the things that we combat all the time is any educator who feels like they can go in their classroom and close the door and just do their own thing. So we continuously and constantly promote the idea that we're working together collaboratively as a team, whether it's your grade level, phase level, or K-12, like we're all working on this together. And I think that is why it's different in education as maybe compared to other, I know that everyone does work in teams in some way, but that is why that time together is so powerful and valuable, is because that is our philosophy in education, is we have to do this together as a team.
I would say one of the challenges, I mean, we're strongly advocating for weekly. I think that there's something about consistency for families too, the predictability and schedule that just makes a lot of sense. And I do think that we can have a very high quality school day. I think we can have a very high quality school day with an early release weekly. But if there's no appetite for that, bi-weekly would definitely be our strong second choice, because monthly there's just no momentum to it. You learn it's so choppy and disjointed to just get together with your group once per month to truly expedite any sort of change that we want to see directly applied into the classroom.
Can I ask a really baseline question of Sandy and Diane? Is the proposal coming to policy because we're looking to change the overall policy itself and it being for longer than a year instead of this coming to the board directly?
No, because to be quite honest, and I think I had pointed this out previously, board policy as written does say that the calendar proposal is supposed to come to the policy committee before it goes to the full board. So you seeing this is really just us trying to follow the policies that we have in place.
Okay.
Sandy, you're on mute.
As a parent and an educator, and my wife being an educator, we had many conversations about this, and where I worked in RSU 14, they did have early release probably for the last 20 years. What I liked about it I like the fact that teachers aren't being pulled and get subs, so they have to work on the math curriculum or the writing committee. All that work could be done on the early release day. and it was smooth, it was consistent. We didn't have, this different sub coming in and the teacher not there. So if it's done well, I think it can work well. And not so much now, but I felt with No Child Left Behind, standards-based education, all that work just cannot be done before or after school. So there's got to be some structure to give people staff development time. And it can work well. It's just really up to the administrators and the teachers to make sure it's tight and that it's worthy. And before you know it, the community, again, is very supportive of that work over the years. I think where districts get into trouble is if it's not done well and it's loosey-goosey. I think that gives it a bad rap, but I don't think that would happen here at all. So, I mean, the other thing, you've seen people just pay teachers later in the summer just to do the work, but you're not going to get, truthfully, people aren't going to be productive a week or two after school's out. They're just wiped.
Well, and the reality about that is we can't dictate that. So we can offer that and
Right.
can pay people as to entice them to want to do that work in the summer, but they're not under contract. And so then what happens is we have this inequitable system because we have some teachers who have all of the PD because they were able to make it work in their summer schedule. And we have other folks who don't have that PD because they had other responsibility, childcare in the summer, a second job, et cetera, et cetera. So, that goes back to Kelly's point about that guaranteed and viable opportunity.
Well, and to speak to that, this sounded more in response to what we're anticipating coming into in the fall in terms of needing to meet more frequently. This is what I heard anyway, was these kids are going to be coming in at all different levels. And, we can't just assume that we're going to open the doors in the fall and that it's going to be business as usual. And so this would be putting a set time in place to give teachers a chance to check in with each other, knowing that our students are not all going to be in the same place this year and that this is not going to be a typical start to the school year.
And remember, when you make a decision about the calendar, you're making it for the coming year.
Right.
It's not like you are, buying a wholesale change that's going to be, for an infinite period of time.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if this is helpful. And, we all bring our own experiences to the table. I was a teacher and we did do early release in the district where I taught middle school. So each period ended up being shortened by 7 minutes. And that was how they recouped the time for that hour and a half at the end of the day. And, from a teacher perspective, when one class is cut by 7 minutes, we hardly even noticed the time that you gather by the end of the day by cutting each class by 7 minutes. So yes, you're seeing, it is certainly, and I'm not saying it's not less instructional time because the time has to come from somewhere, but you're not necessarily, grabbing an hour and a half of intense instructional time from the students. Some of that time might be a recess. Some of that time might be transition time in the hallway. Some of that time is, it depends on the building, obviously. But my experience when I was a teacher was that our half day time, it didn't take significantly from any one chunk of thing I needed to do that day.
What's the date that the calendar needs to be approved by?
April 1st.
I would really love to,
Not approved, but first reading.
to get feedback from people on, like, parents are like as we all know, at the end of their rope with with their kids home. Not me. I love having my kids home. And it's not because I'm a saint, I just do. But and that's a pet peeve of mine too, is to hear people say that. But you know, I know that there are people with real pragmatic, practical issues for, you know, trying to take care of their kids and work.
Yeah,
And
like we have partnered with community services, right? So when we had late start days, like that was an option that was available for parents. And so, we certainly haven't approached Todd Souza or Audra about this because we're in the very early stages just talking with you. But I am sure if this was something that were to move forward, that we would have their partnership.
well, I meant more of like just a quick survey for parents, you know, which would impact your family last, early release or late start. And then for teachers, I'd like to hear the same, and I'd like to know, do they feel that time is beneficial to their classroom time? And that's because we keep hearing first of all, it's one of the things that we've been trying to work on. And secondly, we keep hearing that we're not asking them, that we're relying on the administration. And so I'd like to value that feedback from them and give them the opportunity to provide us their feedback.
Can we
I
also
completely
ask?
appreciate. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, can we also confirm with community services that they'd be available to pick up the childcare and at what sort of a cost? Because I think we need to understand the full impact of this across the board before we make a decision. I'm done, Anne. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I can predict that you're going to get a pretty even split on which people prefer, and it's going to be hard for you all to decide then which 50% to choose, but that's your job. So
Well, and I mean, and that may be, but I want to at least give the opportunity. And if we have to pick, and unfortunately, there's got to be a choice. But if there is an overwhelming response one way or the other, I would like to hear that.
Do you want to also get information about the regularity of those if you're doing a survey?
Yeah, in terms of whether every other Wednesday or whether people would prefer every other Wednesday or every Wednesday. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a survey, we might as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Throw another
All the questions.
That's why I'm like, okay, can we ask all the questions right now?
Yes.
Let's get them all in, because I think our community is getting a little over surveyed at the current time.
I don't know what you're talking about. We don't survey anybody.
Be careful what you ask for.
Pretty straightforward though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this or this, this or this, this or this.
Yeah.
Hopefully it can be.
Want to see the second half in terms of the start of school, and then we can talk about whether you think there need to be other questions.
Mhm.
Okay.
You mean that wasn't it?
It wasn't. I'm sorry.
tip of the iceberg.
All right.
Yeah, in a way, I bet the half-day question is easier. People have strong feelings about that start of school.
All right. So this would be the proposal for the first days of school. As you know, most of you are really well aware of how we've done it in the past with a start of school day, a special day for grade 3, 6, and 9. K2 in general has had a different start for a bit. So I'll give you a minute to read over the slide, and then I've got some great experts to talk this through. Anyone need more time?
So no big changes for 6-12, sort of maintaining the current plan or the, historical plan with some slight adjustments. But for K-5, we're looking to really, the major shift is for Wentworth because K2 has had a different looking start for many years. And I think I'm going to kick it over to Anne and to Jess if she's still here to talk about what that looked like at K2 this year. And then I'll talk more about why it's important for Wentworth students and families to have that same opportunity. I think just bearing in mind as they start presenting that we all have 2/3 of our school families who have never yet, next year we will have 2/3 of our families who've never yet set foot in our school buildings. So our current third grade families have never been in our school. They didn't get, the orientation that that all other years, there was no open house, all of those pieces. So it's sort of a fresh start for 2/3 of our school families. And then in addition to that, we're hopeful, again, making some assumptions that things are looking more back to normal next year, that we'll be welcoming back a large portion of our student body who has not been on site at all, our fully remote students, and starting that transition back into school. And then it will be a transition for almost all, for most of our students to be transitioning back to full time. So I'll have Anne and Jess talk a little bit about what it's looked like at K2 and then talk more about Wentworth.
Okay, so this current school year, we made plans very quickly and sort of on the fly in August to bring kids back into school in a hybrid model. And, we kept pushing the time back a little bit for the first start dates based on need for PPE and all those other pieces. So obviously we don't need that kind of time anymore. But what we're hoping to do is to have some individual appointment times for all kiddos on the September 1st and 2nd. That could be in person, it could be virtual. Hopefully it will be in person with families being able to see the school in very small groups in very safe kinds of ways. For families that have never been in the building before, who drop their kids off to us in a car drop-off lane and watch their kid walk into a building they've never seen the inside of. And for parents of young kids, that's pretty scary. So we want to make sure that they get a chance to get in here and see it and really get a visual of what their kids are going to be doing every day and where they're going to be. And then we were so fortunate last year to be able to have sneak peek days or small group days that allowed us to have half of our cohorts into a class at a time to practice that physical distancing, to practice that mask wearing, to practice what school was going to be like. And that worked out so beautifully. Teachers just found that time to be incredibly valuable and incredibly meaningful to really get to know kids and to really have some time to build some classroom routines and predictable expectations for kids. And so we'd like to condense that a little bit, but have half the kids on one day and half the kids for half a day on the other day, and then bring everybody back together. So instead of just jumping into the deep end of the school pool in August or September 1st, we'd like to wade in a little bit more cautiously and a little bit more thoughtfully and planfully. And so we're really, in the afternoon, we'd have some individualized screening appointments for kiddos, but the teachers would be very busy all day, but the kids would have this sort of gradual, safe, slow start to school that feels comfortable and relaxed and safe and inclusive. Jess, did I miss anything? If you're still here.
Still here. I just can't let go. I'm sorry. Now,
Louis wants to talk too.
yeah, of course. Perfect timing. All right, now he stopped. All right, so I guess what I was going to say is that this came up last night at our Cultural Competency Institute, and the description that Ann and Kelly both just gave you really reinforces what we talked about last night in terms of equity and inclusion and that focus on social and emotional learning that we have benefited from this year. So I just wanted to really reiterate that this plan would support that effort, and it would ensure that we were continuing to focus on SEL and making sure that our kids had the supports that they need as they come into school in a bigger way than they did this year. Sorry about the dog.
It's
And
hard to
welcome
believe.
back to families in that same way. Families in the same way. I think, again, everybody's been in their corners of the world for such a long time. So to welcome back students and families in a way that is supportive. Sorry, Anne, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it's hard to believe that for 5-year-olds, they have now had 20% of their life in COVID. I mean, that just blows my mind. That's a lot for a 5-year-old to readjust to something they've never seen before, never had before. So I just think we, focusing on their social and emotional well-being, focusing on getting them into school thoughtfully, carefully, planfully, and letting them feel safe and comfortable, as well as their parents, because this is going to be a big deal, coming back to school with more kids and more days and all of that.
This supportive return, I think, truly enables us to then, so, I mean, we just have the 2 days before the long weekend that everyone has, the Labor Day weekend, and then the 4-day week. Then I think we're really hitting the ground running, because what happens otherwise is, so we have, I'll just use Wentworth as an example. We have the 3rd graders come in, and then everybody comes in, and then there is a whole lot of one-to-one work that has to happen between students and teachers, that we're scrambling to provide. I mean, 3rd graders are just not independent enough in those early days of school to say, okay, I'm going to just step right out in the hallway now with April to do a running record with her. And so you guys just do your work for like 20 minutes and then I'll be back. Got it? They're just not independent enough. And they haven't really gotten those routines down. They still really just require a lot of support. So again, it comes back to a coverage issue a little bit. We don't have subs that can come in and help support classrooms to do that. But I think we could accomplish so much of that in those afternoon screening appointments on the academic side, while at the same time really taking time that their first experience in coming back to school is entirely focused on their social and emotional learning needs. So they've had small appointments with their families. I'm envisioning that it could look like, on those 2 by appointment only days, that our non-homeroom staff could be available to give some tours while homeroom teachers are meeting with families and doing those pieces, because like I said, 2/3 of the school has not yet had that opportunity. So I think that this plan just makes a lot of sense in terms of the adage, go slow to go fast. I think that we can really hit the ground running after this with kids who are more emotionally prepared, and teachers who have a better handle on exactly where students are in their needs. And I bet you have some questions for us about this.
Don't laugh, but I'm going to go back to the half days. So it'd be safe to assume that we wouldn't consider half days starting until 9:15 based on this opening plan?
I don't think we were asking for half days. We were just asking for an hour and a half of
Early release,
early
sorry.
release. Yeah, that's not a half a day. We take it if you want to give it to us. No, we wouldn't. But
I think that we had said eliminating the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks of school.
Okay, that may have been when we were going really fast over pieces. Sorry, Kelly.
No, that's okay. Good question.
Would it be mandatory for the 9/1, 9/2 dates for people to appear? I know it says by appointment only, but is there an expectation that everybody is going to come in for these?
That would be the expectation, just like conferences. So, and I think that in our technology land, we've created some new opportunities for parents too, right? So if for whatever reason they're unable to, physically come in, we have these alternatives, better than a telephone call. But Jess and Ann, how has your attendance been at the K2 level on your by appointment only days?
We have about 95%.
Yeah, very few people miss it. Usually it's families who've had multiple kids come through and they're all set, but very few people miss those appointments.
And just to be clear, those are appointments that admin sets and sends to the parents. So it's not something that parents have to initiate.
Right.
It's something
Okay,
that
thank
the
you.
admin sends me a letter that says April will be at Blue Point at 9:20 on Tuesday morning. And I say, okay.
Yeah, I didn't get to
I
have one
agree
of
with you.
those.
That's a difference with, with distinction, that if the parents have to make those appointments, we're asking one more thing, but it actually works the other way.
Okay.
I mean, I'm one voice out of the group and represent a narrow perspective, but to me, it all adds up to 12 days, and that seems like a lot of time.
You mean the combination of the early release and the combination of kind of a staggered start for K5?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that with early release every week, Alicia?
That was with the 56 hours, the 3 days, and then the delayed opening.
And it wouldn't be, so it would be a little bit different by phase because 612 would start as they typically had, but
Right.
for
K12
K5,
would be 12 days, and
I think we have to look at the age appropriateness of this K to 12, and 5-year-olds are not coming into kindergarten for the first time ready to take a math test, like they're trying to figure it all out. And I think we have to be mindful and thoughtful about how we expect them to come into school and for how long we expect them to come into school when they have spent 20% of their life in a COVID situation. And I hear what you're saying, Alicia, but I feel like we have to look at the big picture and we have to look at the long-term process of if we bring them in and just like wear them out the first 3 weeks of school, we have not been paying attention. We have not listened to what's right for kids that age. And I'm not saying 6th graders can't do that because they're older and have more experience. But I think our younger kids need a little TLC those first few weeks of school, and they need a more gradual start. And I think they're going to get more out of school in a small group in a day released at 1 o'clock or 1:30 than they will exhausted and scared. And I want to go home. And when is my mom coming? And, we don't necessarily have our kinder camp opportunities all lined up in as much as we have in the past. So we don't have those transition times yet that help us with that separation. I hear you, but I just think we need to think about who these kids are when they're coming in and how old they are and what their needs are after being in a very sheltered environment for the last 12 months.
well, I think we can agree to disagree on that.
I think one of the things that we've talked about a lot in the world, I guess, but also especially in education is, wouldn't it be a failure on our part if we just went back to business as usual? Because we've learned so much and we've never had this opportunity. And I heard that on some show I was listening to today. Like, if we don't take what we've learned from the last year and a half and, what are the things that really working? What did we learn from this? And what are we going to change and shift so that we can do better? Then we as leaders have failed. And so what you're seeing is, our best thinking and our learnings along with our staff, and what have we learned that we can do better as we move forward into this next school year. And that's what's being presented is our version of we're going to do even better than what we have done in the past because of what we've learned.
Well said, Jess. And to tag on to what both of my colleagues here have said, you know, for years I love third grade Discovery Day. I think that it's a really awesome, exciting day for the kids in some part, but for the grown-ups a lot. Like, it's exciting to welcome in our new kids, but year after year, I see some wiped out, run down little 8-year-olds by the end of traipsing around this big building, meeting millions of people. They're just on system overload by the end of the day. I just think that this is a kinder, gentler, more appropriate way to welcome them back into school in a way that they're going to genuinely be excited about. I get the, you know, kind of, I get the math of this that you're doing, Alicia. I totally do. But I genuinely believe it is like a go slow to go fast situation, and welcoming kids back post-pandemic in a way that's going to work best for our littlest learners.
I feel like I'm going to challenge it just a little bit with respect to not taking the same care with our middle and high school students. They've been out. I respect what you're saying, Anne, about the 20% of their lives, but we've got students who may have been remote for a full year. And as a middle schooler, how do you walk in on day one and be like, boom, we're back in business after being behind a computer for a year? And it doesn't feel as though we're giving the same care and concern to our older students. And I don't want them to be lost in this process. I'm just wondering, what supports are we doing for them?
I don't disagree with you at all. And I think that each phase level was asked to come up with their ideal way to start school. And so I think, you know, I'm sure the middle school would be more than happy to rethink and to, you know, add some more SEL kinds of components into their plan if they thought they could. Maybe they didn't feel like they had the permission to do that. But I think what Jess said is so important. Like, we would be so wrong to not take what we've learned from this and apply it going forward, instead of just going back to the way things have always been just because. That's a huge missed opportunity.
And Leanne, there's a few of us on this screen who have middle school and high schoolers, and I'm one of them. And my son we don't live in Scarborough, but he's going to be a freshman in high school next year. And we've already started having conversations about, he's been with a group of 5 or 6 people all year, and he's not getting an opportunity to go back with even 14 people or 15 people or his whole grade level. He's going to be in a high school setting in a short few months with lots and lots of people. And he's missed 1.5 years of middle school, basically. I mean, he's missed it, but you know what I mean. I do 100% agree that the care and concern that we are trying to give to our youngest learners should be district wide, not just for our little kids, because it's dear to my heart that is happening, you know, in my own home too. So I hear you.
Again, I mean, it's happening in my home. I will have a rising 6th grader, which is crazy. And, you know, this is not a secret, but my kids are fully remote right now. So it will have been 1.5 years since my daughter was in a building. And so obviously, you know, I also would like to see that same level of kind of a soft launch for our rising middle school students, and not just because I have a middle schooler, but because I believe, you know, in the philosophy that's being presented here. I do think that, you know, to Alicia's point, when you add it all up, that's kind of a shocking number. And so
let me just interject, April, I miscalculated, it's 14 days.
Okay, thank you. And so that is definitely something I need to think about some more, but I also, you know, what really resonates with me is that this is the first time this has ever happened, you know, and we only get one chance to send these kids back to school this year. And so that's another thing that kind of is front and center as I start to think about these back to school plans.
I think for me, it's a combination of the two approaches. And so like looking at the opening day, it's 6 days that are impacted. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, obviously I want our kids' social emotional needs to be met. But I mean, I'm sure we're picking that based on the calendar. I haven't looked to see if the 10th is a Friday, but I'm sure it is, you know, and so we're sort of picking that out of the hat in terms of convenience and what makes sense in terms of the school week and that sort of thing. And none of us knows really like what's going to work or what's going to be effective. And, you know, I'm concerned about the overall impact to kids in the learning process. And I'm worried that 14 days is a huge missed opportunity on top of, you know, what they've already lost.
So I guess a question I have is, you know, because I hear what the concern is, and, you know, Alicia, I appreciate that you pointed out, like, you know, that's the first week and a half of school. So my wonder is, would it be more palatable if it wasn't all 4 days that week of the 7th through the 10th?
I would feel better about that. I mean, because I do see that, I mean, you know, from a lay person perspective, I guess as a parent, you know, I do see the value of that, and I understand the rationale and can imagine why it would be valuable to teachers.
So what would you see as the sweet spot for that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know. It just feels like a lot, I guess is my concern. And I'm trying to balance like what's needed and what's ideal versus also the kids that have lost so many learning days. And so like I don't know what the answer is.
Just to add, just to sort of a little more insight into our thinking in terms of those 4 days, it was, so if we were taking a class of, you know, 18 to 20 or so students and thinking about how long a potential screening appointment would last, we were trying to think of how many afternoons it would take for a teacher to have a screening appointment with each student in his or her class. And so that's why we extended the 4 days, the week of the 7th.
How many was it done in when we extended it last, when Hillary was on the board? And it must have been last year, I guess.
It was a little bit different then because they were doing screening appointments, academic screening appointments then, and we're proposing something a little different in that those first 2 days are not academic screening appointments. The full days, those are more social and emotional learning pieces. So Jess and Ann, do you guys want to, it was like the 2 full days, you did some screening appointments then, and we talked about not, welcome back to school, let's do this math test.
On the screening appointments, if something is uncovered, if there's, you know, if the student is just not ready to be in the newly placed grade, is this an opportunity to have the conversation about maybe changing it, or is it going to be you're in the class and we're just going to have to work really hard to get you caught up to your peers?
Those are conversations for kids that we know this year that we'd be having this spring. So our screening appointments are to really, you know, identify any, make sure that the spring and the fall matched up basically. So we're getting our baseline data for the fall, because sometimes there is some summer learning loss, and it's not, you know, it's not pervasive, it's not prevalent in all kids, but they're getting to know a new teacher, and the teacher is getting to know them, and they're becoming familiar with, you know, with that student in those academic screenings, in addition to actually doing the academic screenings. But the conversation around, is this the right grade level for you? We should be having those conversations this spring, definitely not in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
You know, and K2 has had a variety of ways to start. Last year, before any pandemic talk in 2019, we changed the way we brought kindergartners in, and we didn't start them right away. We didn't have their class placements done over the summer like we had in the past. We took the time to screen them in school in small groups, and the teachers got to know and got to meet every single student. And then we took some time to place kids carefully and thoughtfully based on what we saw of them at the very beginning of the school year. So kindergarten didn't start this way last 2 years ago either. And that was a change for us. And it was a very successful change, and a very, people loved that, but we're not going back to that either because of what's happened in the world. And because we want to bring kids, we want to bring kids in carefully. And so I don't know that this would ever happen again. I don't know that the year after this, if we're all back in school and all vaccinated and everybody's sort of back to a normal, that this would be necessary. But I think this is, like we've said, the one and only time we're going to come out of a global pandemic, hopefully, and bring kids back into school. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about it. And more time doesn't equal more learning opportunity at the beginning of the year when it's hot and new and unsettling, and the first time I may be away from mom in a long time because of the pandemic and all those other things. Doesn't mean that they're ready to sit there and learn everything that we're ready to throw at them.
So I want to be cognizant of people's time because it is nearing 5:30, and I know we're still kind of in the middle of a discussion here.
Yes, and we're scheduled to end at 5:30.
Is the goal to have a recommendation from the committee, or is this, are we supposed to arrive at a consensus, Alicia?
I mean, we have in the past, right? I mean, I don't know that that's what the policy says. I mean, I think that that's like usually the normal course of committee work. And it would be nice if we could. For me, this conversation just feels so much bigger than one committee. It feels like a real board discussion. And I don't mean that this was inappropriate, Diane. I appreciate that you kept us on track in terms of following the policy, and I think it's a good way for us to make ground. I mean, I see the value in it. I just, in terms of a recommendation, I don't know if anybody will miss it, other than, we can hash out some of our concerns now and hopefully avoid that when it goes to the full board.
Yeah, so if we look at the policy itself, it says that the administration will propose a school calendar to the policy committee prior to March 1. We didn't do that prior to March 1 because this was the first day that we were having a meeting. And then the policy committee will consider feedback from staff, students, and community members. And so you've made that ask to us in part as part of the meeting today to go and get you some more information. And then the last piece is that it is the role of the policy committee to present the proposed calendar to the board.
What does that mean?
I think it means what I was hoping.
Endorsing whatever you bring.
I agree with you, Alicia. This, I think it's probably unavoidable that no matter what comes out of this committee in terms of a presentation, that I foresee a lot of the same discussion happening at the board level. So to some extent, I worry less about us putting forth a formal recommendation unless unless we have to come to consensus at committee, and then we're supposed to be kind of stand together as a committee at the board meeting. That's the difference. at what point are we not individuals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal behind the policy, again, we certainly weren't here to write it when it, you know, went through. But I think the intention underneath the policy is to at least have the committee here say, here's a proposal that we think we can live with, and then present it to the full board. And, you know, again, then that becomes a different discussion. But, you know, I think it certainly would be helpful to the full board if we had a direction that we were seemingly going in.
So then why don't we do this? Why don't we figure out how long you need for the survey and for us to be able to look at it, and then we'll schedule to come back and we can take a second swipe at it after reviewing the survey results.
Sure.
I'm also going to throw out that while we haven't been following the calendar historically, I'm hoping that we're not going to follow it to the law right now, because that would mean this would be one more thing to add to the March 18th agenda, which isn't enough time, I don't think, to get the survey results back. And that meeting is already going to be pretty full. Just throwing that out is a major concern for me.
Oh, does the policy say prior to April 1st?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, prior to the first board meeting in April. So we
Isn't
would
the
have to
first
do it
board-
March.
Oh, prior to the first. board
Prior
meeting.
to.
The first board meeting in April is the first. That's awfully darn close.
I know it's super close, but that's not what it says.
I can appreciate that.
You know, I'm kind of a rule follower, so if you tell me I can break the rules.
Well, could we put it on there and then table it?
I think that's absolutely what we should do. That would be I would be in favor of that. With the understanding that we present it to the board and say, this isn't ready, and our policy says we need to present it to you, but it's not ready, and make a motion to table. And at least that way we're being clear with the community that it's being developed. I could live with that.
Do you want any part of the survey to ask about the START proposal?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last question.
Sorry, I was asking if you wanted any part of the survey to ask about the start of school proposal here.
Oh, the delayed days.
Yes.
Um,
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding fully what you want us to set up a survey on, so that we get you all of the information that you're looking for.
Speaking just for me, I'd really like to have more understanding about why the middle school and the high school isn't in agreement with bringing our students in carefully, and what makes it different for them before I could say, yeah, let's go get that out to the community.
Yep, we can certainly bring that back to them.
And I remember Kathy and Sue having certainly a rationale for this start. You know, it wasn't that they were just deferring back. They certainly had a rationale for this. So I'm sure they could provide more insight. They're just not on this meeting.
Yeah, to be
And-
quite honest, we didn't spend a lot of time on the start of school proposal. Most of our leadership council discussion was around professional development throughout the year.
In theory, I think it makes sense to ask about the first days, but it's such a complicated question that I don't know how you could possibly do it justice.
Yeah.
And I also think that
I'm
it's
happy not to ask. I just, you said that.
yeah, I'm not sure how reliable it would be, other than, oh, we've got a trip planned, or you know, something like that.
I would agree with that. I think that we're presenting a complicated proposal, and you have to have a lot of background information to be able to understand what the ask is. And so even if we did craft the most perfect question, you know, are people really in a position to answer the question in a thoughtful way? And so I would be fine not surveying parents about this. But I would like to second Leanne's request that we hear from the middle school and the high school, just in terms of what a more modified opening could potentially look like.
So when should we look to come back, Diane? What do you think?
I think she's frozen.
Yeah, I think Sandy is too.
Oh, she's frozen? I thought she was thinking.
Oh, she's back.
Everyone's frozen because everyone was frozen.
Yeah, and
We were all talking.
I said I thought you were thinking because you were going like this.
No, I was the only one moving on my screen and the rest of you had that thinking pose. Just saying. This must be like karma because my computer is saying that my internet is unstable. It's trying to tell me that the day should be over.
Yeah, it should. So I had just asked you what you recommended for timeline for coming back to policy.
So I guess my question is, like, I know that we've been having this policy meeting on the second Tuesday of the month,
Yeah.
but that would bring us, into April. And so I don't, I guess I wonder just what's the will of the group.
Yeah, we're gonna have to cram something in. So I guess how long do you need?
I think we probably only need about a week. We're talking like a survey that's going to have a couple of questions. So it's going to be super limited.
So if we did sometime the week of the 22nd?
Yeah, that would probably work fine.
Yep, doable.
Do you want to set a date? So do you want to do the 23rd so that we're staying consistent on Tuesday?
Yeah, let me just check my calendar. The 23rd, you're saying? Oh, we have the interview committee.
We do have interviews tentatively scheduled. But
Oh. I was looking at the wrong calendars.
I could do earlier in the day. I do have a 3:30 court event.
Yeah, I could do 2 o'clock.
I could do that, Leanne, in April.
I can't. I hate to say lunchtime, but I'm free 11:30 to 1.
I'm free then.
yep.
That's fine.
Okay. So
And maybe I can bring one of my friends back and maybe someone from the middle school and high school can join us next time.
okay.
Great. And I need to apologize up front to these amazing leaders because when I asked them to come to the meeting, I let them know it would be for 30 minutes.
Well, that's what we had down, but
So thank you. I can't thank you
Thank
enough.
you.
Leaders.
Thank you guys.
It was a good conversation.
I just crashed the party. I wasn't even supposed to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
well, it was helpful. So thank
It was
you.
very helpful.
Yes.
And it's never crashing. Join the fun.
All right. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.